Welcome to Work in Progress, a podcast series where I pick the brain of thought leaders within the field of people and culture. My name is Pernille Brun, and in these talks we explore the latest trends shaping the future of work and the evolving landscape of modern organizations. In this episode, I'm speaking with Erik Knauf, VP of Talent and Culture and Enabler of Engagement and Belonging. You are sitting where, Erik?
I'm in Hudson, Ohio, outside of Cleveland.
All right. And you brought your coffee mug and to get you started of the day. It's afternoon in Europe where I'm sitting and you're in the US. So Erik Knauf, you are the talent acquisition expert to go to. Anything that has to do with belonging, with engagement, with enabling connections, with talking about what's going on and cooking when it comes to recruiting and attracting the right workforce. So that's why I wanted to engage with you in a conversation about the year that went by, 2024, and that the year we're looking into right now, 2025. Perhaps you would like to add a little bit more about yourself before we start looking back and looking ahead. So welcome. Erik, who are you?
Thanks for having me. So Erik Knauf, sitting on the other side of the planet from you, has, as you know, had a history of spending time in places with you, whether it be in the States or in the UK or in Copenhagen.
Correct. We did some work together, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's right. And it's been some of my best experiences professionally. My career has been around all things people. I joined a consulting firm that they were hiring a guinea pig for somebody to do research.
Yes.
And that was me. And it's the first time they did that. And that role, in essence, was a sourcer back in the day. And it was with a retained search firm as well as contingent. So I learned the business of retained search and recruiting at a very young age.
Yes.
Right out of college, which is much earlier than most.
And what year are we speaking about?
What's that? Oh, geez. Shall we? So 1989 is when I began.
All right. Yeah.
And so I've been at this for a year or two. Times, whatever. And then my career did evolve from that into leadership. I had my own firm for a while, did a tour of duty through lean consulting. What is the value of what it is that people do and where does waste hinder value? Yeah. So spent some time in that space. Did a tour of duty in the RPO world, the early days of RPO at scale, where actually, I led
an RPO, just for those of us.
Recruiting process outsourcing.
Yes, correct.
And I was part of at the time, it was the largest HRO, human resources outsourcing deal in the world. And that was at Goodyear, where I ran the P&L for recruiting. I had an opportunity to join Ariba.
Yes, and Ariba is all about invoicing and transactions.
So it truly is it's a marketplace. And one of the biggest in the planet. So we were acquired by SAP in 2013 and for $4.3 billion. And with that, SAP truly was able to spread its wings in the P2P space, the procure-to-pay space. I spent time, as you and I had the opportunity to work together at TradeShift, another P2P organization with a heavy EMEA focus, doing some unique stuff particularly around tax that nobody else to this day is. But I'll tell you, it was probably from a cultural perspective, one of the most unique and rewarding environments I ever worked in.
Okay. Yeah.
And so I have to say thank you to you for that, in part because of the book, The TradeShift Way, that you helped co-author.
Yes, correct. And the TradeShift Way was all about onboarding of new employees, getting a fair understanding of what the business is all about and how we look at people and culture. So that's where you came into the picture as well, right? So our collaboration started there, looking into, how can we create a workplace where people want to be, where they feel connected to one another, despite the fact that we had actually offices all over the world, right? So Eric, you struck me back then and still do to this day as someone who cares about human beings. So the sourcing sphere, the talent acquisition, those names are actually to me a little bit maybe mechanical, but then when they are connected to you, they become human. And that's why I wanted to engage with you on this particular day, almost the first day of the new year, around, what happened in 2024 and what's going to happen in 2025, because you have this eye for humanizing the workplace, right? And maybe we should just dig into it and start talking a little bit about what is it that you see and have seen in 2024? What's happening in this sphere of workplaces of today, seen through the lens of P&C, people and culture, and also HR?
So you asked the question, what have I seen take place over the last year?
Yes.
I'm going to go back one more year.
All right.
2013, the world really got to know ChatGPT. For many individuals, it was a toy. For many individuals, it was this new gadget that you could play with that was fascinating, but to what end? Fast forward to this past year, 2024, AI has come into its own. So this past year, we've seen some really, really, really cool things happen around, but with particularly belonging engagement, agility, resilience, and with technology. So as it relates to belonging, yes, there's been a tectonic shift when it comes to DE&I, but we've also seen a doubling down on inclusion and the importance of inclusion.
So DEI, where the I
so
stands
diversity,
for inclusion.
equity, and inclusion.
Yes.
Let's go back to the notion of how Gen AI addresses this.
Yes.
Gen AI provides some of that support that you need. Gen AI frees you up from doing other work so that you can focus on mission, on impact. Gen AI, because you're now freed up to do other things, you can now foster connections in a different way with individuals. So, in fact, there's tooling out there that is now capable, has capabilities to help you foster those connections. Inclusion is about creating a culture where everybody feels valued and empowered. They not only are at the dance, they are invited to dance. They are invited, they're actually invited to contribute. And so it goes beyond the representation. So with the D and the E, that's about who's at the party. It's kind of hard to actually have to invite people to the party if there's no intention of including them. So I do think in this next year, we're going to see a massive shift away from the D and away even maybe from the E. But as I mentioned earlier, inclusion is where we're going to see the activity.
In 2025.
And that actually can be really, really positive. And the reason I say that is, let's start with creating an environment where people are included today, now. Because it's going to be inauthentic to recruit diversity into an organization where they're never going to be included anyways.
Yes.
The next one, third on the list, is support. And we talked about that, meaning, are there systems, are there processes, are there resources to empower people to be the best that they possibly can be? And that, so yes, that is tooling. That part of that is what we're talking about now with Gen AI. So the tools, but it's also systemic stuff like mentorships and guidance that is needed. in order to support them. So these systems, these structures are actually embedded for people to do what they do. So with this, then, how do you infer that you're seeing this? It's participation rates in mentorship programs, in development programs. Retention rates are also significantly higher as a result of that. The fourth being connection. We spent a little bit of time talking about community, building relationships that actually matter, that transcend the workplace even.
And that's where people want to be and don't want to leave the companies, right?
Right. And so and it's that level of connection that fuels collaboration.
Yeah.
When people feel like they are connected, they are more inclined to share. They're more inclined to share their ideas. And part of that goes back to psychological safety, right? But it fosters relationships not only within small teams, but then cross-functionally, cross-organizationally, cross-hierarchical stratification, right? It's when you see that, this is actually where wonderful collaboration and innovation really starts to pick up.
And what else did we see in 2024 that really influenced HR and the people and culture sphere?
I'll tell you, I think a surprise for me was how HR tech adoption has been so widely disparate. And I'm talking about disparate in terms of locations. So while EMEA is starting to see more and more focus on sustainability and DE&I innovation, North America is seeing greater emphasis on AI and on automation.
Okay.
So there is a cultural divide there.
Interesting.
There is a quasi-cultural divide even within HR that we talked about. You see TA sort of leading the way with, and it started off with bots and scraping tools and the like that sourcers use and that schedulers use. But now it's part of how we do what we do. But I'm intrigued by disparity in how organizations approach it. There's been a miss on belonging. As we talked about this earlier, organizations for so long have been so focused on the D, E, and now starting to be I, which is good. But I think there's something more fundamental. HR leaders that embrace data are twice as likely to advance in strategic roles as those that don't. So if, as an HR leader, I can see not only what is happening in my own functional area, but if I could connect dots between that, say, total rewards, and the rest of the and talent management and talent acquisition, but more importantly, corporate objectives. What are the OKRs of the organization? And how do you tie them together? Having a data literacy, it's going to be even more and more important. But so what I've seen over the past year is going from just a surge of point solutions to the larger tooling in the marketplace. Certainly, Workday being among the biggest behemoths out there. Rippling is really stepping up. Dayforce, and there are others. They are now starting to get into. There's not only leveraging AI in ways that point solutions might not be able to fund, might not be able to get into. The challenge is how do so many point solutions weave their data, their stories together in a way to inform decision making for HR leaders. And so I think there's been, to see how that shift has occurred has been pretty darn fascinating for me.
Interesting. And so now 2025 is almost upon us, or maybe upon us now when this episode is actually released. What do you see in the crystal ball? What's going to happen for HR and people and culture in 2025?
So I think there's the broad, and then we could focus specifically on HR. Organizational agility.
Okay, agility.
It starts with that. Gartner stated that 62% of HR leaders identify workforce agility, so workforce-specific agility, as critical to achieving their goals. It just so happens that those organizations that are adopting AI are also those organizations that are adopting internal marketplaces for talent.
All right.
They're the ones who understand how to break down the job to skills. And then how do you identify those individuals, whether it be for a permanent assignment or just simply for a project. So it's having that agility to draw from within without having to go to the outside. What does beyond internal mobility, well beyond that, how do you as an organization identify the need simply for a project, for something to get done? So yeah, there are going to be disruptions in the marketplace. We know that. Whether it be geopolitical, whether it be technology, those organizations that really know how to drive agility through understanding how stuff gets done, that's going to be huge. Next is there is a clarion call from HR leaders and from founders even to address belonging. And there is a direct line between that and corporate productivity. So, Deloitte found that 79% of organizations with strong belonging and programs around it see improved employee engagement. This is the time. There are some, the former president of SuccessFactors, Meg Bear, is stated, this is the time.
And why do you think that is? What's happening right now that makes people come out and say, this is the time for belonging and inclusion at that deeper level now?
So if you take a look at history, fairly recent history, there was a true competition for talent, which included retention, pre-pandemic. The pandemic upended everything. How we operate, people went remote. There was greater levels of disconnection than we had ever seen. It cuts across function, it cuts across geography, it cuts across seniority. Everybody felt it. In part because of technological advances, organizations adopted ways of interacting, but they didn't necessarily. They were interested in driving engagement. And how do we keep people engaged when we don't see them? Right? With remote work, how do we get productivity if we can't see them? We found individuals working multiple jobs, right? Because nobody was seeing what they were doing. You have a generation, Gen Z. There's a great article that came out maybe 2 months ago where it was referred to as the loneliest generation. And folks just don't feel connected. And so you have all of this pressure of loneliness. You have this pressure for corporate productivity. You have this pressure between return to office versus remote. You have all this pressure around competing for talent, retaining talent. So it's all of that coming together at the same time. Belonging addresses is a silver thread through all of it.
Mm. So that's the silver lining. And how do you then ensure belonging at the workplace? Even if people are not in the same office, if they do happen to work in a hybrid setting, some may be in the office, some might not. You might be dispersed across locations and geography.
It warrants repeating again and again and again. It's safety, psychological safety, it's inclusion, it's support, it's connection, and it's purpose. Those 5. Leadership, and particularly HR, plays a role in facilitating all of them. Again, as important as diversity is, you can't have diversity if you're not going to include them to begin with, right? So how do you establish a sense of belonging for people who are there before you begin any external recruiting initiatives? Mm-hmm. So there's a role that HR plays with that before people even arrive, right? It's how do we introduce people during the interview process?
Yes.
How is it that when we onboard individuals, are they invited to dance?
Yes. And the organizations that do it well, they invite people for meaningful interactions during the first, not only week, hopefully, but also extend it to the first couple of months, and really deliberately try to make sure that people belong when they,
exactly. And yes.
And so 2025, would you say, is going to be the year of belonging? Do you have hopes for that? Is that what you see?
I have hopes already. I've actually been told that.
All right.
I've had CEOs say 2025 is the year of belonging.
And I think it's so interesting how, our conversation started out spiraling around technology and how technology could foster also a sense of belonging. So maybe we should round off by looking into 2025 and see how can technology aid and foster and create a sense of belonging if this is in fact going to be the year of belonging.
So there are a couple things that are worth pointing out. For 2025, 47% of HR leaders stated that they plan on adopting AI-driven predictive analytics, right? So again, it's happening. You could choose not to embrace it or not. I mean, it's going to happen, right? So we were talking about what HR can do. The skills and competencies that are going to matter most, we talked about this earlier, is change management. Mm-hmm. That matters. McKinsey found that organizations with strong change management capabilities are 4.5 times more likely to meet transformational goals. Mm-hmm. Change management, which then ties into agility and how important that is. We talked about that earlier. Skills intelligence. So how do you assess, map, and predict skill requirements? Yeah. We need to be involved with that. Collaboration is the other one. How do you break down silos and foster cross-functional activity? Yes. There's the notion of super connectors, and are you leveraging them? These individuals that are sort of the glue that you might not necessarily be aware of. Do you even know who they are in your organization? Yeah. David Green, for those of you that don't know who David Green is, hop on LinkedIn, follow him. His work is abundant, but he calls out the power of superconnectors as helping facilitate change. I think those are the competencies, but I think we're going to see this coming year, Gen AI is here, but it's going to get more predictive. You're going to see automation as a strategic enabler. And again, we sort of talked about the mundane, the automated tasks, but it's going to one step further and actually recommend tailored opportunities, whether it be training or the like, for employees. And that's going to be based on employee preferences, which then is going to drive greater employee experience. We talked about how leaders enable employees. AI can certainly help doing that. And then last but not least, and we talked about the role that point solutions are going to be challenged with moving forward in the HR tech landscape. 70% of the buyers, and this is the HR leaders who go to the HR tech, to that conference and the like, but they want solutions. They prefer solutions that actually integrate into their existing tech ecosystems. So moving forward, this coming year, what is it that we can do as HR leaders? Embrace agility.
Yeah.
It's here. Embrace it. And that, whether it be how we do workforce planning, how we align skills, how we align reward systems, we need to refocus on ROI. What is it, ROI? How can HR leaders, through storytelling, showcase our impact on retention, on engagement, on productivity, but tie it back to ROI? What are the financial benefits associated with reducing attrition? Through can we actually have that conversation? Do we know how to? An investment in people and technology. HR should not necessarily be relying on what IT recommends that we should be doing with our tooling. And then prioritize, and then last but not least is prioritizing thought leadership. That relates to AI, that relates to skills, that relates to the nature of work and how it gets done.
Yeah. So there's a lot in store for HR and people and culture in 2025, and still a lot to do. And some of it links to using AI in, especially within the predictive part of the analytics, but also creating a sense of belonging. I think this is a really, really nice way of ending this episode, with just emphasizing how important it is that we stay human and that we stay connected to one another, because this is where the meaning of life unfolds also in organizations. So I want to extend a big thank you to you, Eric, for showing up today. It has been a true pleasure. Thank you so much.
Pernilla, Happy New Year to you. What an amazing way to wrap up 2024.
And I'm clinking the glasses for a new year.
I mean, this is fantastic. I'm grateful for you and the work that you've done. This is, again, a tremendous way to wrap up the year. And I look forward to working with you in 2025. Likewise. And I look forward to seeing the realization that 2025 year is the year.
Exactly. Cheers to that.
Cheers.
You've been listening to the Work in Progress podcast on people and culture. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to share on social media. For more resources on people, culture, and working in a modern world, please visit getsession.com and check out our articles, guides, webinars, and more. Thanks for listening.